Big Fish Contracting Podcast number 30-something.
35?
Take one. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. Hi.
342.
Yeah. Hi. Welcome. What's wrong with me?
It's the coffee.
It might be this cocoa coffee. Welcome back to the Big Fish Contracting Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Deringer, along with my lovely co-host, Tanya Welson.
Good morning, Eric.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Doing wonderful. And we have a returning guest.
Yes.
Everybody knows her. Her name's Kelsey Kasten.
Hello,
KK.
everyone. Coming back on, Kelsey.
I call her Little One.
Little one.
Yeah, she is the little one. Yeah. But lovely to have Kelsey back. We're going to dive into a very intriguing topic.
It's going to be riveting.
Yes.
Yes.
Last time I was on the podcast, you guys asked me to find some hobbies, so I did. And it's permitting, everyone.
Yeah.
So exciting.
Yeah, we're going to demystify the building permit process today.
It's very mystical.
It is.
And
It's
lead
a
to
process.
A lot of mystery. It's a huge process. And in all seriousness, this is an important topic, and information needs to come out about it.
And Tanya, you used to get a lot of the building permits for us before Kelsey, and I know you loved it.
I must say I did not
Yeah,
love it.
exactly. Without a doubt, nobody wants to sign up for the
authenticity here,
permitting
and
process.
permitting was my least favorite task. When Kelsey came on board, she was so cute. She was like, I would just love to take on permitting. She literally said, I would love to take on permitting. And I was like, you sweet thing. Of course you can do that.
Yeah, it's been a nice burden lifted.
Oh, yes. And
Yeah,
Kelsey's
but not a burden for Kelsey.
No, she loves
because
it.
she's so smart. But let's talk. How are you doing, Kelsey?
I'm good.
So the last time we had you on was your first day.
Yep.
Very first day.
Yeah, and that was almost a year ago. A little less. How's your first year of project managing going?
It's been good. Learning a lot, but what I've really enjoyed the most is that we're a small enough company so that as I find things that we want to tweak and adjust to make the customer's experience better, we can just do it, which is really exciting. There's not this whole process of approvals and making sure that we're all making sure we're on the same page, but I can just go in and change our process to help the customers better. So we've implemented pre-construction meetings, so whenever we are starting a project, before we even start demo or anything like that, I'm walking through things with the homeowners. They've got a whole FAQ sheet now of all the most frequently asked questions during remodels and additions. So that's been, I think, really beneficial. And I've enjoyed being able to work through those processes with the homeowners and then also work with our contractors, both in-house and subcontractors, to just really dial things in even further.
Yeah, amazing. Now we have... We talked a little bit about being a woman in a little one.
A little one.
Yeah, but being a woman in a pretty much male-dominated industry.
Mm-hmm.
How are you navigating that? How's that working for you?
I have had no complaints or concerns.
Okay.
Every contractor that I've worked with has been super helpful, and no one has ever once turned their nose up at me and said, well, I'm not helping you, or I'm not going to answer your question because that's a dumb question. Any one of them is more than willing to talk about their process, give me information, so when I do ask and question things, no one's feeling like they're being micromanaged. So that I've really enjoyed, because there's so many parts of everyone's trade that, because I'm not in that trade, I don't know all the ins and outs as much as they do, and they've been more than gracious with sharing information, which has been awesome, because that then helps me communicate with the homeowner better and share exactly what's happening on their job sites.
Yeah, and what do you feel like you've learned the most?
Oh, probably
besides permitting.
The master of permits.
Yeah.
It's probably just working to have all those details ferreted out throughout a project, and then also seeing things through the customer's eye, because we know internally that we get everything taken care of for the homeowner. At the end of the day, there's not going to be a stone unturned. We're going to make sure that what they get at the end of the day is exactly what they wanted. And if it's not, we're going to tell them why we can't make that happen, or we're going to give them an alternative solution to get them to a similar or same point. What I learned most is being able to then communicate changes to a homeowner on why something looks the way it does, and then telling and reassuring them, hey, we are going to take care of it. Because Something I've learned actually specifically is that, because I'm admittedly too young to know this, that there was like a whole wave of bad contractors that were ripping people off. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, we're just going to do the right thing and we're going to get it taken care of. But homeowners don't know that because they have that in the back of their mind that there are contractors out there ripping people off, and that has not been my experience with contracting.
Yeah.
So I've just enjoyed that whenever we have an issue or whatever, we can just take care of it for the homeowner.
Yeah. Last question before we jump, unless you got something else, before we jump into permitting, is how do you feel about our carpenters that you work with every single day?
I like our carpenters a lot. They are awesome. And I get raving reviews about them too from homeowners, which is always nice to hear because I can say it all day long. And it doesn't matter as much as when a homeowner is telling you they're a great group of guys. Just got a text message yesterday from a customer that's really excited about them and was, thrilled with the work they were doing. And that was just day one. So
That's awesome.
thoroughly enjoy it. And they're a great group of guys to see on site and touch base with. And they're always willing to show me stuff and also willing to let me help out. Today we were putting in a kegerator, so I was putting that together with them and learning how that comes together. And I've demoed decks with them. Like, it's just neat to see how things come together and then have a better appreciation for all the trades.
Yeah, amazing. Well, let's dive into this building permitting process for homeowners. Just kind of start with just a broader overview. Fundamentals.
Yeah, maybe people don't know what a building permit is or why they're
what you need them for.
Yes.
Just from a 10,000 foot view, let's fire away.
Building permits are basically there to protect homeowners, contractors, and the people around them that are working. So it's really just a system of checks and balances to make sure that things are being followed to code and for safety purposes. And that, like I said, protects both the homeowner and the contractor on both ends of things.
Yeah, typically what types of projects need permits?
It'll vary by municipality, but if you are doing anything where you're adding on, so you're digging a foundation, you're adding on to an existing building, if you're doing anything plumbing, electrical, like a full, intensive remodel, that's something like outside of paint and maybe replacing flooring, that's stuff that would need permits. And then also on kind of a more cosmetic but still functional side of things is some municipalities will require it for roofing, siding, and windows, depending on the scope of work. You'll find the overarching theme of permits is it will depend by municipality. They're all a
it's
little
different per city, per village, per town.
Yep.
And so first of all, we determine what the municipality requires.
Correct.
And some of them require much more information than others.
Yep.
Yeah. And typically it's listed right on their websites.
Yeah, so you can find it on their websites. A lot of homeowners and contractors will call in directly to get that information because you'll find that they might have maybe a checklist of everything that's needed for a permit, but there might be something in their municipal ordinances that isn't covered in there. So that's where sometimes it's easier to call in, ask for that information. The big thing I always tell homeowners is get it in writing because you can call and give them some information and then maybe they don't have all the information. So maybe they're saying, yeah, you can go ahead and do that, but they're not telling you, here's all the steps though that have to be completed before you can even, put a shovel in the ground. And that's something that we run into from time to time is homeowners gathering that information ahead of time before they even have a contractor involved saying we're good to go. And then, things maybe not being caught that needed to be done ahead of time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, because some people may have an idea, well, I want to put this deck on the back of my home or I want to extend my garage, but the county or city or municipality really determines your lot size and how far you can go with a building. So most places you can't just build right up to the edge of your property line, or the driveway has to be so many feet from the home and things like that. So the only way to get that information is really going through the building permitting process.
Yes, and the more you can find out ahead of time, the better, because obviously you still need to know if your project's even feasible financially. But then, it's kind of a weird in-between, and it kind of happens as you're going through that bidding process and as you're working through, your questions with a contractor to figure out.
So certain things there's going to be far less need for work on the front end. For example, if we're doing roofing or siding or windows and we're not changing the structure at all, we're just doing a new roof, we know all we have to do is just submit the permit application.
And that is pretty straightforward. It's usually a
Yep.
one-page application with a flat fee. A lot of the counties or cities will just have like a flat rate for specific projects. Some are dollar per amount based on the value of the project. But yeah, those are probably some of the more simpler permits to apply for.
Absolutely. Yeah. The roofing ones are roofing, siding, and windows. If you're not changing the size of the windows, those are ones that are pretty straightforward.
Cut and paste
Yeah.
almost.
And some of them you can apply right online. Some of them you have to go in person.
Yep.
Some you can pay online. Some you have to write a check. So, so it
Yes.
really, so many variables.
Then when we get to larger scale projects, we'll go to let's start from a kitchen or a bath. We're not adding any square footage
Yep.
to the house. We're just going to use the existing square footage, maybe move plumbing and obviously electric. So that looks a little different than, let's say, if we're starting to add an addition.
Correct. Yeah. In terms of like the remodeling scope of permits, if you're maintaining your same footprint and you're not changing much, even if you let's say you took out a wall and you put a header in, that's pretty small in the scheme of things. So really they'll just want to see that you're going to consider the additional loading that might be coming down in a spot, making sure that, everything's structurally sound. But those ones are pretty straightforward. And a lot of times they'll just need a plan with the layout, what's existing, what's going to be changing, if there's any changes to maybe how you're framing something, a cross section. So that's pretty much for anything internal, like within the existing footprint, it's relatively straightforward.
Yeah. But when we start adding square footage to a house,
Yep.
that's when the permitting process, especially on the front end, is necessary, really.
Yeah, you can literally not start a project until that permit is approved.
And
And that can take
some time.
time.
Yep. Yeah. And there can be a lot of back and forth just trying to make sure that whatever you're designing is within the parameters of what they'll allow. So making sure that your property is zoned appropriately, that if you have a private septic system, that is sized accordingly, maintaining setbacks from property lines. There's so many different things.
Yeah,
Height
because
restrictions.
sometimes if you add an additional bedroom, now you also have to change your entire plumbing situation with the septic and all of that.
Correct.
So
Yep.
there's a lot, and some municipalities also have to have the plans presented to the board before approval as well. Some of
Yep.
those larger projects, which can't, usually towns have board meetings maybe once or twice a month. So that's also kind of something to take in mind when you do start permitting. And I think this is another good point: is who does the permitting? The homeowner, the contractor.
Yep. So in our case, the contractor, Big Fish, does all of our permitting. So we're the ones submitting all the permits that are needed. If we have subcontractors like plumbers, electricians, HVAC, they're going to submit their permits on their own on our behalf, or sometimes they submit it to us depending on if the municipality wants it all in one, or if they are fine, having multiple permits come in. But we're going to take care of that for the homeowner. There might be some contractors out there that don't have the office staff that we do, that are maybe more of like a one-man show.
Or the licensing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That maybe they'll have the homeowner pull the permit, but they give the homeowner the information that's needed. In our case, though, we handle all that. That way, any questions and concerns come back to us, and that's kind of how we like to operate. Is that way we're managing the project for you. That's our whole function, is to make
And
sure
any
that
homeowner can do the research and find the information, but if you do hire us, we take care of that process for you, which is kind of a load off of your plate and makes it easier on you.
Yes.
Sometimes permitting, in particular for additions, we're going to require a survey.
Correct.
Yep. Is there ways of getting a survey online through GIS? I've heard, or do you typically need a stamped survey?
Municipality differences. So some of them are going to require an actual stamped survey. Maybe it's got to be done within a certain time period to make sure that it's current. But otherwise, some are just okay with, we know where you're going to be putting this, and it'll be okay. And as long as you draw it on a survey and show that we're a certain distance away from setbacks and existing things, that's fine for some of them. So it kind of just depends. But if you're not sure if you have a survey, that's where reaching out to your local municipality is important, or you can even reach out to the county. A lot of times the county has records on file, like for the private septic systems. They'll have those drawings for any of those permits pulled, or they might have a survey on file that maybe your township doesn't.
Sure. One of the things that we'll run into when we're looking to pull a building permit for an addition is something called a PSC.
Yep.
You familiar with it?
I am.
What is that?
That is a preliminary site evaluation. And that is essentially like an environmental double check to make sure that you're, once again, certain distance away from your private septic system.
And that does then kind of add another step to getting the permit approved. And so you first, before you go to your local municipality, you would have to go to Waukesha or Washington County.
Correct.
And get
Orzaki,
that,
yeah.
or Orzaki,
Yeah.
wherever your main county is, and get that approval. Then once they get that stamp of approval, then you go back to your local one with that approval, and then further the step into getting the entire building permit approved.
And the PSC is for not only the size of the septic or the location, but also for the size.
Correct. Yeah. So in the case of like if you're just building a detached garage, not a concern for adding additional load to that septic system. But if you are going to be, adding a bedroom or a master suite, something like that, and you're changing, or if you're changing a living room to a bedroom, that's going to be something that they're going to require the septic system to be sized accordingly for it.
And why would you say bedroom and not bathroom?
That is a great question, and
Thank you.
baffles everyone, I think, because you could have 20 toilets flushing all at the same time, and that doesn't.
I thought it had something to do with the amount of people that potentially are living in the home. So,
correct.
You could just do a study in your own home, right?
Yeah.
When 3 people are home versus 10
They
people.
figure
and
if
they
you
know.
are adding a
Yeah.
bedroom, you're adding people. And the
that
people
means more
means
usage.
flushing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Unless you're like us and we just go outside.
Yeah. Outhouse everywhere.
Can we not?
You.
This is me and Alex,
you.
my son. I mean, that's too much information. Making permitting fun with Big Fish Contracting. We've actually tried to get around the permitting by just telling the building inspector, "Oh no, they go outside."
This family is definitely go outside.
It's
It's respect.
We're digging cat holes.
So through this permitting process, I know there's a process. So you said earlier, when we are doing kitchen, bath, anything, there's multiple stages of permitting. So you have the overarching building permit, and then under that we might have an electrical permit, a plumbing permit. What is the stages of inspection typically? Like there's multiple inspections through a building process, right?
Yes.
So can you tell us that the stages, like when you would call in for an inspection?
Yeah, so depending on the project, if you're doing anything where you're adding on, you're probably going to be calling for an excavation and a footing permit, or not permit, but excavation and footing inspection. Then once that's approved, then they're going to look at your foundation once that's been poured or laid, and then you're getting into the rough phases of things. So that's once all your rough plumbing's done, electrical, HVAC, and then everything's framed up as well. You'd be calling for an inspection there. Once that's been approved, now you can insulate. Now we're calling for an insulation inspection. And then from there, you kind of have like a long period of no inspections then. So then your last inspection is the final inspection, and that's when everything's pretty much completed. Now on our end, that doesn't mean necessarily that we're done. There might still be punch list items like paint that has to be touched up. A piece of flooring it needs to be, removed and adjusted because something got nicked. So that's kind of, the punch list though isn't part of the permitting process. That's just our internal.
Yeah.
What happens if you don't apply for a permit? Ooh. What are the ramifications?
Scary.
Because maybe someone's out there thinking we can bypass this.
Right.
Also a good question.
Yes. So if you don't pull a permit and you get caught, which is always the possibility, you're going to get issued a stop work order, which is a big red sticker that goes on your property saying that you are to halt all work until permits have been pulled. I know that it might seem like a good idea to bypass pulling permits, but the issue is that now you've upset your municipality, most likely, a little bit. So now your permitting process is probably going to take longer than it would initially. The other thing is there's financial ramifications. So a lot of times if you don't pull a permit, you're paying double, triple fees, which if it's for a roof, okay, so it's maybe $200 instead of $100. But we're working on a project right now where the permit fees were $3,000 normal. without having
without
done
any-
anything wrong. So if we had started work before that, we would have been paying, that was a triple fee.
9,000.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it can be very expensive and can add up very quickly, and it's not
Well,
something
and then like you said, and then they could just intentionally delay your project because they hold the power then, right? They,
Exactly.
Yeah, you've done something wrong, and now they can say, well, you disappointed us, so now we'll hold this permit until we deem that you're ready to work.
Yeah.
You know.
And you're going to be under a microscope, a little bit more intensely than you would maybe if you had done everything right in the front end of things. And then as a contractor, it just kind of puts your reputation on the line too, that it doesn't always look the best, and then they might kind of watch for you in the future.
Yeah.
Correct.
And these inspectors are out all the time, so they're driving. They know, they can tell. You can tell when a house is being worked on. Dumpsters, trucks there, people coming and going. So it's usually pretty obvious, and so it's like
It's always best to pull a
just
permit.
pull the permit.
Yeah. That also helps, almost not knowingly, but to pull a building permit, you have to have a certain amount of detail already established. Because the inspector is going to want to see that detail. So when you give them a drawing of an addition and it has rafters and it's carrying loads, they're going to want to see that has been stamped by an architectural engineer possibly.
Right.
And the more preparation you put on the front end of a job, ultimately the smoother it goes. So though this permitting process can be a little bit of a hassle, but ultimately it is in the best interest to do it for everybody involved.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is as much as permits are protecting the homeowner and the contractor from like wrongdoings or shoddy work, it's also protecting everyone from making sure that the job is running a little bit smoother than maybe it would without those checks and balances on the front end.
Yeah.
The more preparation you put in anything on the front end, the better it's going to be and smoother it's going to be, on the back end of things. So it'll, eliminate potential delays of work having to be redone twice. That's the other thing too, is if you don't pull a permit and now let's say you don't pull an electrical or plumbing permit and you put drywall up,
You gotta take all the
they might
drywall
make
down.
you pull all of that
They
down.
have to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when you go to sell a home, a lot of times they'll ask you, did you do any work without permits? So now you have to, admit to
Disclose
that.
yeah.
And it's a lot of, it can be a lot of stuff that adds up down the line and causes other issues.
And it can be, I think, stressful probably to have an inspector breathing down the neck of people doing the work. But again, it's just really making sure that those codes are met. And like you said, then the project, 10 years from now is holding up because it was done properly.
Yep. Yeah, and it's not that the inspectors are trying to get anyone in trouble either. A lot of it is just making sure, you pay taxes for a reason, and it goes towards those services, so making sure that things are done right. Yeah. And we're all human too. So our contractors might miss something, and it might, could be just something really small and simple, but having that second set of eyes just to double check that everything's correct and that they didn't miss something is, it's a service.
It's a
it is a service, and they're up to date on all the I shouldn't say ever-changing codes, but the changing codes.
Yeah.
As products continue to develop, codes continue to change because we can do things that we couldn't do 20 years ago because of the products.
Speaking of codes, I think it's also important that you have to be licensed in order to apply for a permit. So we have our dwelling contractor's license and qualifier number. And so if you are hiring somebody and they don't have those qualifications, they will not even be able to pull a permit. So I think that's also very important.
There's a fun little thing called continuing education credits.
Yes.
What are continuing education credits?
CEUs.
Yes. So that's where a contractor is required to do a certain number of educational courses or seminars throughout
2 years.
The 2-year period. And that's just to make sure that they're up to date on code changes, on maybe material offerings that are out there. A lot of lumberyards will put that on, or you can do stuff like that online. And it's just to remind contractors and like a refresher on anything that's either really fun, like new materials or products that are out there, or it could be something really boring to everyone else.
But none of it's boring to you.
None of it's boring to me.
Right.
No.
Kelsey actually loves it.
She loves it. She curls up on her couch and
Yep.
does her training.
Yes. Yeah, because you're able to just learn so much information from it. So it's nice to just get a refresher on how like liens work and all that kind of stuff. I've also found hobbies since our last podcast.
What?
Other than permanent.
Do tell.
Yes. I have chickens now, and I'm going to have a little hobby farm, so I'm taking after Eric with all that.
Love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Your
So, that's a
chickens are
hobby.
great. That is a
They're
hobby.
cute.
That's a lot of work, too.
Everyone,
Keep
Kelsey
animals.
has a hobby. Yeah. Congrats.
Yay. So proud of you.
I do. It was this thought came to my mind. Often over the years, we have gotten asked to pull permits, but not do the entire job. So, and it gets
Good
a little
question.
tricky
Yeah.
because, for example, they want us to do all the roughing, but then they're going to leave it. They'll finish it, and that gets a little tricky from the contractor side of things.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so a lot of it just comes down to how do you close out a job that's not actually complete. It's also probably going to be a multiple permitting stage then if you are roughing something in and then going to finish it later, because your permits are going to expire typically within 12 to 18 months from the date of issuance. So that's where it can be an issue, like from a logistics standpoint. But then from our standpoint as a contractor, now if I just leave it roughed in and someone goes to do it later, we just have so much less control over the final outcome of that project. So we don't love it as much, just because it's really difficult to control that final outcome and give the customer a good product. And then anyone else coming in later, if they're under their own license but we pulled the initial permit, it just kind of muddies the water and can cause a lot of issues if something happens of, well, whose fault was it?
Yeah.
Right.
So in those situations, and we have done it before, not often, but we would recommend a homeowner pull the permit at that point, because homeowners can pull building permits for their own house.
Yep.
Correct?
I think it depends on the municipality and the type of permit. So what I had seen from some municipalities is that I can't remember if it was for plumbing or electrical, but maybe the homeowner could do that, but they needed an actual licensed contractor to pull the other types of permits.
Yeah.
It also depended on whether a licensed professional was doing the work or if the homeowner was doing it themselves. So if a homeowner, like I said, I can't remember if it was plumbing or electrical, but it was one of them that if you have a licensed contractor, they need to pull a permit. If you, the homeowner, were doing that work on your own, you could pull the permit yourself.
Yeah.
But the homeowner had to be doing the work. So for us,
It's muddy.
it is. And it just, it can very easily turn into a lot of finger pointing then in the end.
Yeah.
And there's no quality control in that situation.
Yeah, and for certainly for us, we understand it, like trying to be able to find solutions for homeowners to be able to get these types of projects done and have us come in and do some of the work. But it's tricky. It's a hard to navigate that. We have done it before, but it's a question that's asked a lot.
Can you pull this permit for me?
Yeah, or can you do this and we do this and finish the job? We're open to the conversation for sure, but understand it is navigating those waters from a business side of things, because we have relationships with all these different municipalities and inspectors that we need to keep very in very good graces with them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a lot of times too, homeowners are asking that because they're looking to save money, because we know that these are not small investments. So that's where we just like to remind people, if you're trying to save money or you're trying to do something, to maybe save time, a lot of times by you trying to tackle one thing on your own, you potentially cause delays or additional charges just because something isn't done. Maybe it's not demoed perfectly that it needs to be. So now I still have to send someone in for a half day's worth of work, which still adds up and still adds to the bottom line.
Yeah.
Same with customers sourcing their own material. We get it. Like, you might have your own relationships, but it's tough because now you're trying, I'm managing your project, but now also you're managing parts of it, and it can just, the ball can get dropped a little bit easier. It can just cause delays. We might schedule something anticipating something being done and it's not.
Yeah.
So that's where, like, if homeowners are trying to tackle something, painting is a great one, because
They can paint.
you could paint,
Yeah.
Maybe if you are really good at flooring or you've done tile work before, maybe that's something, but even then that gets tricky, because now if you're trying to do a shower and it needs to be waterproofed, and now let's say it's not waterproofed properly and you have a leak, well, is it on the homeowner that did the tile or is it on the contractor?
Yeah.
Right.
It's just kind of that gray area.
Yeah. So we obviously love to be able to just GC the whole job and have Kelsey involved from start to finish. But these are normal questions that come up in our interactions with our customer base. And so we're always just trying to educate and navigate together. But is there anything else that we're missing on the permits?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feel pretty good about it.
I feel great about it.
Yeah. Do you feel good about it?
We hope you do.
Yeah.
And if you don't, call us.
Yeah,
We'll
call
take care
us.
of
We
it for you.
got, yes,
Absolutely.
all three of us have had plenty of permanent
Tanya,
experience.
where can they get a hold of us at?
Oh, they could go to the World Wide Web. bigfishcontracting.com.
HTTPS.
HTTP.
Yeah, TP,
colon,
// Yeah. Or 262-470-1114.
Have a great day. Thanks for listening.
See ya.